Welcome to our first How to Win event for the APG 2021 Creative Strategy Awards. It's actually a truly global competition, and I was really pleased to see on the guest list that we have planners and strategists from Greece, New Zealand, Nigeria, Portugal and the US planning to join this call already on it. So you are most welcome, and we'd be delighted if we got lots of really interesting international entries this time. The setup for today is very simple. We're going to hear from Vicki, who is the current APG chair, and from Michael Lee, who is the chair of shortlisters for the awards this time. Vicki was also the chair of shortlisters from last time. So the two of them are going to do a very enjoyable, entertaining and insightful double act on how to win an APG award. Michael's going to talk a little bit about what he's expecting from the awards this time. And they are both going to talk about examples from last time and previous awards that they think particularly exemplify excellent creative strategy as a kind of a grist to all of your writing mill. And then we're going to hear from Bhavin Pabari, who is the strategy director of Grey London. And he's going to treat us to his gold winning paper about which. And this was the paper that also won the Denise Williams Special Prize for Best Performance in front of the judges. So Bhavin, I know you haven't done it for a couple of years, but we're very much looking forward to it this afternoon. He's also going to give us a few tips on what he thinks help him write a good paper, in the hope that they will be useful for everybody else. And then at the end, Michael is going to host a Q&A, and you can ask questions of him, Bhavin, me, Vicki, whatever. But from now, I'm going to hand over to Vicki and Michael. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. So before I start, just a couple of points of order, just in the Handforth Parish Council style. That image of the chairs was entirely the brainchild of Vicki. You can read into that what you wish. Obviously, I've spent many days trying to decode the subliminal significance of those chairs. What she's saying about me, is she implying that I'm a stylish modern classic or a flash corporate wanker? I'm still working it out. Secondly, I just wanted to pay tribute to Sarah for the massive success of the launch event. Sarah promised me before that we would absolutely smash our KPIs and recall and word of mouth. And I said at the time, how is that going to be possible? I mean, this is a virtual launch event. No one's going to want to come. It just doesn't compare to a glitzy physical launch event. But little did I know that she'd only gone and hired the best in the business, which was ZoomBombByMeeting.biz. And, you know, I think we can all agree they certainly delivered money's worth with their immersive theatre experience. So, Sarah, I'm sorry I doubted you. I never should have. And once again, neither Vicki nor Bhavin nor I have any idea what she's got up her sleeve this time. So let's just wait and see. Anyway, right. Let's get down to some of the practicalities. Firstly, the eligibility dates. The work, if it's going to qualify, has to have appeared in market between 5th of April 2019 and 31st March 2021. It doesn't have to be a campaign verse that perfectly fits within those windows, but as long as it was on air, maybe for one day or somewhere in the public domain, any time between those dates, it qualifies. So hopefully that is pretty clear. Secondly, shortlists. If you make the shortlist, you are already a winner of a particular hue of gold, bronze or silver. So once you've made it that far, you can sit back and wallow in the glory of your achievement. Next slide, please. This is the wonderful team of judges that we've got, who holds your destiny in their hands. A very deliberate wide range of people, some familiar faces and familiar agency names, but we're also joined by people, I think, as I said before, that deliberately from a very eclectic range, from people who are specialists in behavior change, people from the worlds of PR, people like Martin Radford, who's the director of Ubiquity, which does a lot of media econometrics and evaluation, and people from client side like Alexa, who's strategy director at Amazon. So that is who will be looking at your paper alongside me. And just to clarify, once again, there is no theme. because we just want to champion the thing that matters, which is pure creative strategy in whatever form that it comes. I think it was very successful last time where we had no theme. So we thought, why mess with a winning formula? So what does pure creative strategy mean? Well, in my view, I think it just, in the same way that great creative tends to be highly original, I think the same applies to strategy. It's the sort of inspired original thinking that I think is the polar opposite of the more templated approach to solving a business problem that a management consultant might take. So if we were to sum up how or what we'll be asking around that, I think the key question we'll be asking of every paper is, did a smart bit of original strategic thinking play a critical part in the success of the outcome? And that outcome can be commercial, it can be behavioral or societal, or it can be even what the creative idea ended up as, or all of those things. So that is the killer question at the shortlisting stage. And then just a quick word on the special prizes. There will be, as ever, a long-term thinking category. Is this 5 years exactly, or minimum 5 years, Vicky? I just wanted to double check. I forgot to ask you.
Yes, it needs to have been running for 5 years and still running.
Okay, 5 years and still running. And then we have a range of other special prizes. There are some others that you've seen in there before, but I think there are 2 new ones as well, which is supremely topical, best response to climate change, and best response to COVID-19. And then just finally from me, a quick word on the scoring. So there are 50 marks in total. 20 go for compelling story, 20 marks for powerful link strategy, 5 marks for that jealousy factor, as in, did you make the judges go, bloody hell, I wish I had thought of that. Useful learning. Will this be something when it is lauded and applauded, that will be something that your planning community will be able to go, oh, I can really use that. I can gain inspiration for that, and that will make what I do better. So as you can see, I think powerful link strategy should be fairly self-explanatory. Compelling story is obviously a big proportion of the scoring, and you might be wondering, well, how do you actually define what a compelling story is? So over to Vicky.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, in terms of the compelling story, there are a number of things to think about, which have been championed actually by some really great papers in the past. But one of the first things to think about is, are you creating drama in the story that you're telling? Now, drama can mean setting up a big problem at the beginning, and that might be one way of doing it. It might be in the telling of the story of how you followed a path and then maybe change direction. You don't have to do any or all of these things, but just think about where that's coming in. It might be about that moment where something was unlocked that was really interesting, exciting, or different. So think about building that into the story, and also to the way that you write the story. The second thing is connection. It's a really easy one to miss, but don't forget to connect your thinking to the outcome. So going back to what Michael was saying about what the shortlisting panel are looking for, it's the connection between the strategy, the thinking, and what came after it. And you would be really surprised actually the number of times where that isn't made clear. So think long and hard about that, and make those signals really clear for the judges to find so they can see where that connection happens. And then the final thing is a strategic twist. So this is really the pivot point where strategy made the difference. So what is it within your paper that you did differently? Was it some information that you found that actually made you think very differently about a problem, or about a brand, or about a market? Was it in the way that you put things together that actually changed the way these things are solved? So you came up with a radically different solution as a result. And I've got some examples that I'll show you of some papers which I think do well, not just one, but probably all of these things really well. And one of the things that I would say before you start writing your paper yourself is actually just go back over some of the past papers. It's is a really good way to start getting a feel for how papers are written. You may not have the actual books, but they're all available on the APG website. So just go in there and you can search around for papers from any year. But I would say, you know, start with last year, then maybe go back to the year before and pick a few from each. But as a shortcut, I've picked a few of my favorites from the last few years that I think, as I say, illustrate kind of creating the drama, creating the connection, and also the strategic twist. The first of these is the pot noodle paper, written by Loz, which is a really, really good paper, really, really well structured. What he did at the beginning was really clearly dramatized the problem, a problem in this case being that the world had moved on and pot noodle hadn't, and that was shown. It wasn't just written, it was also demonstrated through the use of that chart and the use of the images as to where pot noodle were and how they were so different. That today's youth were hardworking, and actually pot noodle had historically been about quite the opposite of that. So that was a really good starting point. It felt like an almost insurmountable problem. Then the strategic twist, it was really cleverly articulated, but essentially what they said was, we need to take the pot noodle brand and actually do the complete opposite. Pot noodle needs to stand for the complete opposite of what it stands for now. And they made the analogy with the Barani twist, which is where an athlete or a gymnast takes off, twists in the air and lands facing in the opposite direction. And that's what they wanted to do with pot noodle. And it was such a beautiful way of demonstrating what they were trying to achieve. So that was a great example of bringing that twist to life, quite literally. And then they made the link to the idea, to the execution of the idea, and also to the ideas that were brought to life in the real world. Again, very, very clear, very easy to see. And that, I'd say, is a really good example of, at every level, taking the ideas through. And then, of course, they finished it off by demonstrating an enormous effect. Now, it's probably worth just mentioning how far you need to go in terms of proof and results. The way I always look at it is that you don't have to have, I mean, you certainly don't have to have kind of IPA level results in your paper, but think about the results as the proof that your strategy was the right strategy. So enough to give the judges the confidence that indeed this was exactly the right thing to do. Another example that I think is fantastic is Cancer Research UK. Now here, this is a really good example of starting to create the drama right from the word go. And this is the opening paragraph of that paper, which it's just beautifully written. Cancer, biologically, it's the uncontrolled division of abnormal cells within the body. But psychologically and socially, cancer deserves far less restrained and factual description. Cancer is a monster, an unrelenting killer that rips apart families and deprives us of our loved ones. It brings with it doubt, fear, confusion, and worry. And with just under 30,000 people diagnosed a month in the UK, it needs to be stopped. And now, to be honest, having read that, I wanted this paper to do really well. You know, that's the sort of the starting point. So think about how you even introduce the paper, because it can make a huge difference as to how then the judge's mindset is going into the rest of the paper. But they didn't stop there. It wasn't just an opening paragraph. It was actually a really great paper throughout. And what they also did really well here was bring to life, again, that strategic twist, think about something in a different way. And again, visually illustrated it here. So the problem that they had was shown by that image on the left, and the solution, the image on the right. And what it says underneath is someone fluent in droid speak referred to it as the Death Star. Combined and from a distance, it feels impenetrable. But when you get nearer, you see the weak point where you can make a real difference. It's hard to imagine a £5 donation affecting the outcome of one big war years from now, but it's easier to imagine such a donation impacting one of the individual battles happening today. And suddenly you can see how their thinking shifted, and how the way that they thought about cancer and the problem of cancer shifted, and how they might get people to make donations. they made a very clear link, to the creative work itself, but also to the media, and don't forget the importance of media strategy within this. So here they talked about a campaign full of opportunities to act, not opportunities to see. And you can see from that visual of the Death Star and all the little opportunities in there, you can see how it all links through really, really well. And again, they had strong results, which they included. It wasn't the hugest results section, but it talked about the volume of donations increasing by 30%, gives you a real sense that the campaign was definitely successful. So those are two good examples from a couple of years ago. And then there are a number of really great examples from last year where they've, the strategic twist, the thinking that strategy did within it is beautifully shown and beautifully illustrated. The first of them is the FIFA 18 case from Adam and Eve, which the cleverness of this is to understand where the FIFA game sits in society, and that it used to be the case that FIFA were actually just trying to replicate the real world in as close as possible way, and that the culture in the real world affected football and affected the FIFA game. But actually, there were green shoots suggesting that potentially the FIFA game could affect things in the real world, and hence El Tornado was born as a move that started in the FIFA game, but then actually spread out into football in the real world and culture. So a really nice example there of a twist in thinking, and again illustrated really nicely through visuals within the paper. Another fabulous example, Greenpeace. So here, rather than thinking of palm oil as being a classic charity problem which should be solved in a classic charity way by showing provocative images, which is what cause-led communications tend to do. Instead, by looking at things like Blue Planet, what they realized was actually creating an entertainment property might be a more powerful way of doing it. And so Rangtang was born, and there are results in there to suggest that that was a good strategy and a useful way of changing perspective. And then finally, another really brave idea from Mother, but for launching KFC fries, which was really difficult because every time they tried to launch it, the loyalists of KFC were up in arms at a change in fries. And it was just a very, very brave way of thinking about this. But rather than trying to just say these are going to be great fries, what they did was to actually try and remove the loss aversion. So they actually found loads of tweets where people genuinely hated the fries anyway, and they paid for media behind those actual tweets to try and create a sense that actually they were rubbish and needed to be got rid of. But again, a really interesting twist. It's normally the things, those kind of tweets are normally the things you bury, but actually here it's the things that are brought out into the light. So some really, really great examples of thinking about things in a different way. And then finally, I think there are things you can do to make it really easy for the judges. So just remembering that these judges will have read probably, well, tens, if not coming up to more than that, 100 papers. That you actually need to be thinking about the mindset of someone who's spending many, many hours reading papers. When you write with great clarity, make your sentences short and clear. Don't overwrite. Don't be tempted to try and dress it up with big language. It actually makes it harder to read. And I think undermines the case that the beautiful case that you probably have there anyway. You will need to craft your papers over and over again. I can remember the first paper that I wrote, APG paper that I wrote, I remember almost feeling like I can't do this. I cannot take any more feedback. I can't amend this one more time, and forcing myself to do it. And you probably will get to that point, and you just have to push through because it's worth it at the end of the day. When you're writing the paper, it's quite often, I think when we're doing sort of pitch submissions, we quite often want to make things very well designed. Yes, that's great, but actually the classic portrait format for a written document is much, much easier to read, particularly for judges who are reading it on a screen, which is, chances are, is where they'll be reading it. So actually just think about that. That was definitely, I found last time round, trying to read a landscape format is very difficult. Actually, it's much easier if it just runs down the page as you're used to. And then find someone in your agency who's perhaps not too close to your paper to be a sounding board. You will all be intensely close to the paper that you're writing. But if you pick someone that's perhaps not quite as close, they'll be able to give you some of the feedback that the judges might be seeing and feeling as they're reading the papers. And it remains to say good luck. And I'm going to hand over to Bhavin to take you through his award-winning paper, best presentation. So over to you, Bhavin.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll do the presentation, which is a good summary of the paper, and then actually at the end I've got some bits for if you manage to get a brilliant paper through, what you can do to help you with the presentation, given that that's what I managed to nab an extra prize for. So on the paper itself, from kettle reviews to fake news, the reinvention of which. And really this was about how we use cultural strategy to breathe life into a dying analog brand and found a way to fight the inevitable onslaught of internet companies like Amazon. Hopefully by now, at least some of you, if not all of you, know who Which is. It's a subscription. You get one magazine a month, access to a website, and it costs £10.75, so slightly more than Netflix or Spotify, but significantly more expensive than the free reviews you can get on Amazon. So it was clear to us from the get-go that Which reviews were better than free reviews, certainly more so than 5 stars, really great product, my bad luck, lost it already. So this was really an opportunity to take on big bad Amazon and its rubbish reviews, except it wasn't, because when we challenged the quality of free reviews in focus groups, it transpired that we weren't slagging off Amazon reviews. Actually, we were slagging off reviews by ordinary people, the kind of people that were in our focus groups. So they said things like, everyone is allowed to have an opinion, you can't have a go at them for it. I like how they show me how people like me would use it. So the thing was that people no longer bought expert reviews, actually they wrote them, and our potential customers had actually become our competition. And this made a lot of sense in the cultural context. So social media had now leveled out companies and consumers, whilst politicians were busy disparaging experts like Which. So we knew that having a superior product wasn't going to be enough. We needed to get people to question what they were reading rather than blindly trusting it. We needed to find a reason to disbelieve the free reviews. So the solution kind of came from, again, looking to culture. We spotted a shift was occurring. So while it was true that in the early days of MySpace and Facebook, people trusted what other people had written online, after Trump and Brexit, this was changing. And in early 2017, people were just realizing that the open, people-powered platforms of the internet were being infiltrated by misinformation. And we thought, hold on a minute, product reviews live online, surely they aren't immune to this. And they weren't. So after some digging, we found that fake reviews were in fact a very real problem. We even found a website that reviewed fake reviewers, which was quite meta in and of itself. So talking about fake reviews in the groups with people made the energy in the room change. So they were kind of surprised, a little bit tense. It's kind of that feeling you get when you realize you've been duped. And actually, when you look back, you can see all the little clues that kind of lead up to that moment, and you feel a bit silly. And where people have thought that they could navigate dud reviews, fake reviews are a much bigger problem they couldn't solve on their own. So fake reviews became our kind of reason to disbelieve. Now, for Which, who are incredibly rigorous and completely impartial, their reviews are facts, and that's really, really valuable. But that's much more powerful when you position it in opposition to a bigger enemy in culture. In this instance, it was misinformation in the form of fake reviews. So this was really an opportunity to elevate the brand and make it relevant again. In the briefing, we played fact or fake with the team to see if they could spot which reviews were fake and which were real. And we also kind of highlighted the telltale signs of fake reviews that we found in desk research. And actually through that conversation, what we realized was, actually, is there a way to kind of undupe people who are being duped, or kind of inform people in the same way that all the team and everyone felt more informed after we talked to them about it? How can we make people feel smart and empowered, kind of like the magazine does, rather than falling for fakes and feeling stupid as a result. So the first execution kind of played off the game we played with the creatives. The thing about fake reviews is they look just like the real ones. And the second one, which was kind of the hero and core execution for the campaign, was really about highlighting the tactics of fake reviews to educate, but also to entertain, because though we wanted to make it a public issue, we didn't want to point the finger at people and make them feel stupid for it. So we kind of wrote this almost review of fake reviewers. This was also obviously a digital problem, so digital comms played a big role in the campaign, though Amazon wouldn't let us place our banners on their site. And the consumer response was great. I think people saying things like it's really important, it's educational, this is perfect for a brand like Which. Ultimately leading to a 13% uplift in signups, and actually latterly we saw key shifts in brand measures like relevance, appeal, and modernity. And that is how we managed to connect Kettle reviews to fake news. So that was kind of the presentation. And then I will talk through quickly just some things that I learned through the process of actually getting to this presentation. I think the first thing to say on how to win, which is why you're all here, is don't undercook it. A lot of the slides in here are kind of visual references from the presentation, and I remember thinking, oh, you know what, I can just chuck those together and stitch a bit of a narrative together. And I was quickly disabused of that notion by wiser minds than mine. It's not a few slides, it's 50% of the marks, and I think it's easy to forget that. So once you do get through writing that paper, there is a second part which is equally important in the presentation. All great writers have great editors, kind of as Vicki mentioned. It's true for the paper, but it's also true for the presentation. So I think it's wise to get someone external and have their perspective on both of those things. Rehearse for time. This might sound really trite, but it was actually one of the most difficult things, particularly when you've got quite a complicated story to tell. 5 minutes is really not a lot of time compared to a pitch or a creative presentation where you've got 10 to 15 minutes and time is fungible. We've got a buzzer at 5 minutes. So it was actually surprisingly difficult to get something to that time. And then the other thing is rehearse for questions. So get as many smart people as you can to present them, get them to ask you really hard questions. I didn't have many that came up from that preparation in the actual Q&A bit, which is again an important part of the process, but it really helped me feel ready. And then I think rehearse again. So many times. Nothing better to combat nerves than knowing that you could do your presentation on autopilot. I don't think I've rehearsed the presentation as much before or since. And then read the brief. I remember watching Loz actually present his pot noodle paper whilst heating up his pot noodle as a form of timer while he presented, and thought, oh no, I need a bit of theatre. So actually, when it came to the presentation, Jim Carroll said, oh, no theatre needed. I just want the story really clearly. So again, that was really, really helpful in realising that you didn't need to do that. And so it's really important to know what the judges are looking for, because it may seem the same, but there's always a bit of nuance. Another thing that came out at the time, which was really, really helpful, was Martin Weigel wrote a piece on writing, which was kind of two big pillars of writing that as he saw it, which was movement and colour. So moving the story forward, and then what bits are adding a bit of texture and a bit of colour. And I've highlighted colour because one of the things you can really do in the presentation that can sometimes be difficult to do in the paper is really bring those quotes to life for people. So it's really, really important to think about how you can bring some of that energy and texture to life for the judges that you can't necessarily do in the paper. And then the last one is acclimatise. So hopefully this time you'll also be able to travel to Google or somewhere similar in person. I actually turned up thinking I'd be nice and relaxed and sit down and present because I felt more comfortable. Very quickly realised that everyone was standing up because you can sort of see other people presenting while you're waiting. And I got given a clicker, which was a surprise to me. So actually, it was good to be able to get in there, acclimatise, use the clicker, mess around with my slides as I often want to, which I don't necessarily recommend. But that's a really kind of simple and obvious thing, but is quite important to kind of get you ready to present as well. And if you do all of those things, plus many other things, hopefully you will end up as this GIF, which may or may not look like me. And that's it.
Thank you, Bhavin.
If anyone has any questions. Well, obviously, I think let's be clear, IPA level econometrics and ROI attribution are not required. You know, one of the main benefits of the APG is that very high level of entry of barriers to entry doesn't apply here. However, obviously, we would like to see some evidence of an effect, even if you can't provide an attributed and isolated 6-to-1 ROI on marketing investment. Do you agree with that, Vicki?
Absolutely, yeah. It's about working out what difference your campaign needs to make and why that's going to make a difference to the brand or organization that's involved, and then demonstrating that something has changed as a result. As I was saying before, I think about it as a way of proving your strategy was right. So it doesn't have to be econometrics and to prove that. If you can show changes in other ways, then that's absolutely fine.
Can you talk a bit more about the Inspired Creative Thinking Prize?
So this is one which is about evidence of real creativity in the input primarily to the brief. So we'll be looking for the kinds of cases where you go, oh, that was really a brilliant piece of extra creative thinking that came from the planner or a strategist, or the input into it as much as the output. It's the first time we've offered this prize, so we don't have very, very clearly defined rules for what's going to win it yet, but inspired creative thinking that went into the brief is essentially what we're talking about.
Is it okay to enter based on a B2B campaign which is not about above the line comms? Absolutely, yes. Do you have any advice for campaigns that aren't commercial, particularly those that are raising awareness of issues? Yeah, it doesn't need to have a commercial objective. It can be a societal or behavioral objective. So it's absolutely, I would absolutely stress that campaigns don't have to have a commercial objective.
Somebody's asked a question about category restrictions for submissions. I think this is about, do we have separate categories? The answer is that all the papers are judged together, difficult though that is, but we do have a separate category for long-term thinking, which we spoke about at the beginning, but otherwise there are no separate categories in this competition.
And the special prizes are available to everyone. They're awarded after the shortlisting, aren't they?
Yes.
But they're available, then they're available to anyone. So you can think about potentially any of those could be something that you might be wanting to highlight throughout your paper.
Could you clarify for everyone the range of creative strategy, i.e. is creative strategy not just related to brand comms, but also media, customer engagement and customer experience, digital products and platforms? Absolutely. I think we're very keen to see diversity of creative output beyond brand comms. At the same time, a more traditional above the line campaign is not going to be remotely disadvantaged because it is that. But yes, we are really keen to see the wide range of inspired creative strategy applied in lots of different places.
This is a question for maybe for Michael, maybe for all of you. I have a friend who doesn't really do twists. Their style of strategy is relentless, following a path relentlessly down the way to the ultimate outcome. So I just wondered if you had any advice for my friend.
I don't think the twist is mandatory. In fact, I'm aware that a few people have asked about the merits of entering a paper where the big story is that in the face of a new client that wanted to change something that was already very successful, they managed to persuade the client to continue with the existing campaign because it was successful. So making a case for longevity or for continuity, I think, is just as merit worthy as something where you've zigged where others have zagged or done the exact opposite, to convention, etc. Does that help, Richard?
Yeah.
I would say, Richard, your friend's won many, many IPA awards, and therefore probably knows what he or she is doing. I think it doesn't have to be like literally a twist every time, but I'm sure in all the cases that you've written in the past, you haven't just done the same as everyone else has done. You will have done something differently somewhere along the line, otherwise it would be just copying, and it's working out what that is and how therefore your solution is better than it would have been if you'd copied the next brand. But I love a beautiful piece of logic that flows from one thing to the next. And I think all those cases actually have some inherent logic in them as well. There's always an inherent logic. And I think if you think about the way that thinking happens, that you're always able to tell the beautiful story that leads ABC through that. And in pretty much all of those cases, that is still the case. There is still a logic that runs through the paper. So I think your friend will be well placed, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you very much to our sponsors and our special prize sponsors. And thank you very much also to Bhavin for your inspired reiteration of your paper, to Michael and Vicki. And we will see you all again, I hope, on the 24th, when we have a second How to Win evening, where we will have 3 of the winning papers from last time, all giving their version of their 5-minute presentation. And wise words from Charlie Snow, who is the chair of judges. We'll have a different chair slide to introduce that presentation for your delectation and pleasure. Good to see you. Oh, one more message, just in case that's another question.
No, it says, yay, well done, Bhavin.
Oh, okay, all right.
Well done, Bhavin. That was very good.
Yeah. Thank you, Bhavin. And thank you all. Lovely to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.